Chestnut Hill Technologies is a leading technology integration and cybersecurity consulting firm based in the Boston area and owned by Boston College alum. CHT provides world-class strategy and consulting to Fortune 500 and mid-cap firms throughout New England and nationally, including State Street Bank, Fidelity Investments, Whaley Computer Associates, and Amgen Pharma. Check them out at ChestnutHillTechnologies.com. That's ChestnutHillTechnologies.com. Okay, hello everybody. Mike Gualtieri here, gearing up for another Lights, Camera, Sports podcast presented by Chestnut Hill Technologies. Once again, I'm your host, Mike Gualtieri. So happy to have you on board. We are so lucky enough to be joined this afternoon with a little bit of a slower time before football gets going. Like to welcome in a great guest. You all know ESPN, folks, and a recent book came out titled Sports Heaven, The Birth of ESPN. And we are lucky enough to be joined by the author, or the co-author, I should say, of that. As we bring in Mike Soltys joins us. Excuse me 1 second here. Mike, thanks so much for joining us. Can you hear us okay?
Yeah, hear you fine. It's Mike and Mike in the morning here.
Well said, well said. Well, Mike, as I mentioned in the intro, Sports Heaven, The Birth of ESPN. You wrote it along with Bill Rasmussen, who founded ESPN as well. Before I get into you and your career, just talk about how this all came about, this work of this book here with ESPN.
Yeah, Bill is now 93 years old, has Parkinson's, and lives down in Florida. About 3 years ago, he went to Jimmy Pitaro, the current chairman of ESPN, and said he really wanted to be able to have the story of the launch told while he was around to still tell it, because he was seeing a number of the people that were involved that had passed. And he said, but he would need ESPN's cooperation, to make the documentary good. And so Jimmy was all enthusiastic for it. I got brought in as a part-time historian for ESPN, working on different history projects. Main focus originally was the documentary, but then Bill wanted to publish a book and an audio book around it, and was going to take the diary that he kept in 1978 and 79 and turn that into a book. Yeah. But said, we're doing all these documentary interviews. Why don't we take all the subjects that we have and use their clips and their thoughts and intersperse them? And also, why don't we bring it up to 2026 and take your entrepreneurial lessons that you learned at ESPN and other businesses you launched and make it a really good origin story, entrepreneur story, but sports media lover story. And so the documentary came out, aired on ESPN in April. Currently, you can rent it on Tenero.tv, but then audiobook came out in April, and then the print book just came out, as you mentioned, and it tells an amazing story that happened in a very brief period of time in Central Connecticut.
Yeah, you're right. That's a good point. You don't have to be a sports fan to like it. It's really about starting a business, building it up, and to go from there. Okay, I want to get to the book in a second, but I want to learn about you and introduce you to our audience as well. Yeah. You're a Connecticut guy. I'm from West Hartford. You went to UConn. Right. Talk about how you were involved at ESPN. I know you were there from the start or right in the early 80s at UConn?
Well, yeah, it was the classic right place, right time story. So ESPN is launching. Originally, Bill's idea was to launch ESPN as a way to televise UConn, and this is pre-Big East UConn, to the state of Connecticut, because there was very little television. He had been fired by your favorite team, the Hartford Whalers, and we can get into that. But he was going to launch this network to do UConn sporting events. That led to ESPN, but he committed to do all these UConn events. I'm attending UConn, and I'm a stage manager and stats guy and stuff starting in 1979 on productions. But then I got hired by Bill as his first intern. My senior year at UConn, got hired the summer of 1980, and I was at ESPN then for the next 40 plus years, primarily working in PR until now this historian role has come about. I
know. I used to read about you through your press releases in the 90s and growing up, and you were involved. You were involved. Just tell our audience how much you were involved with the new hires, new deals. You were the point man for all those things.
Yeah, working at PR, I was in charge of announcing a lot of the things that we did, new businesses, new shows. I dealt a lot with state of Connecticut issues, so I dealt a lot with the local media that you would have been reading. So if ESPN was in Hartford, looking for a tax break or in
Yeah.
Bristol looking for a zoning change. I mean, I was often in the middle of that, but a lot of it was dealing with proactive publicity around ESPN. And then as ESPN became as big as it became, then also just dealing in issue management as various things would pop up.
What was your favorite story or thing to work with or to announcement to make when your career at ESPN?
Well, I had the good fortune to go to a lot of men's and women's Final Fours, probably 50 in total, and
A lot of
started going
UConn.
when UConn was not that great. And so then to be able to be at the Final Fours, and particularly they're the only school that has won the national championship for the men and the women in the same year, and they did it twice, 2004 and 2014. I
Yeah.
attended 4 of those games back to back
Wow.
years, and I'll make the claim nobody's disputed. I think I'm the only one that can say that, and so that's a pretty cool thing for somebody who's a UConn grad and working here. And so I was there in a work capacity on all of those, and it just was amazing. To never would have thought that that UConn would win one championship, and so to be able to be there and see both the men and women win, and seen probably between the two, I've seen most of them. I haven't gone to the, after I was done with the work travel, I haven't been to Dan Hurley's latest, but I did get to Gino Auriemma's latest in Tampa.
You got me thinking that's a good problem to have where there's so
Yeah.
many. You said you you've been to most of them.
Yes. I couldn't even tell you the number at this point because
How's your
sorry to
talk-
rub that in. I know you Eagles, that bugs the heck out of you, but sorry.
I'm interested. How did you pull that off logistically? Because back in the day, the men's game was Monday night, the women's game was Tuesday night, right? So
Right, and there was some Sunday night with the women and Monday with the men's and things, and
yeah,
I would overlap and not be at the full Final Four, but I would be at the men's for certain events and the women's for certain events,
gotcha.
and just was able to schedule the flights and work it all out.
That's amazing. Very cool. A great career, and now you're still involved with ESPN as a historian, and now you're writing books. Sports Heaven, The Birth of ESPN. You get it anywhere books are sold. Mike Soltys joins us. Now, Mike, just talk about how ESPN, for people who might not know, in the late 70s, I know the story of the Whalers. Bill Rasmussen was fired, and talk about, I love the story too. Maybe we can start there. I-84, Waterbury, Connecticut, stuck in traffic, 1978.
Yeah, so well-known hockey guy Howard Baldwin ends up as well. As Bill points out, he got fired twice in 5 minutes because he not only worked for the Whalers, but at that era, Gordie Howe and family was finishing out the career of Gordie's in Hartford, and so the whole Howe family was there, and Bill was running Howe Enterprises, which was basically the business operations for the Howe family. So both Colleen Howe and Howard Baldwin fire Bill within 5 minutes, Memorial Day of 78.
Wow.
Starts talking about this UConn idea, but then it gets brought to him by RCA that you can distribute the programming nationwide on this new thing, an RCA satellite, which is rotating around the earth 23,000 miles up. And they realized that for the same costs they were talking about doing the state of Connecticut, they could do nationwide. It's like, okay, then we're not going to do UConn and Bristol Red Sox games. We got to think bigger.
Yeah.
And they're driving to, Bill and his son Scott are driving to his daughter, Scott's sister's 16th birthday party on the Jersey Shore, get stuck in traffic on I-84 in Waterbury. And they just are brainstorming, what are they going to do 24 hours a day? And Scott said, hey, we could televise football all day for all I care. And kind of the light bulb went off as they're stuck in I-84 in Waterbury, and said, yeah, we're going to do sports. And the whole drive down to New Jersey, the whole time at the daughter's birthday party, and then driving back to Connecticut, they just brainstormed what ultimately became the 24-hour a day, including Sports Center, including the studio in Bristol, all of it kind of in that car ride. But then, it definitely is a Connecticut success story because you tie in the UConn thing I mentioned, the Whalers, they ultimately ending up, they started out in Plainville, Connecticut, but then there was cheap land available in Bristol and ended up in Bristol. And so it very much was a Connecticut, / New England success story for the launch of ESPN.
And take our listeners back. And you guys do a great job in the book. I really liked it how you go day by day almost, like at the end, hour by hour. But just that fall of 78, spring 79, summer 79, just the conditions in Plainville and just what they were dealing with, like one copy machine, one trailer, dirt parking lot. Just take our listeners back to that scene.
Yeah, it's just amazing what happened in such a short period of time. You got a guy that's fired by the New England Whalers without a whole lot of money, and yet he was able to do a deal with the NCAA, with Anheuser-Busch for advertising, with cable systems, with the city of Bristol, on in a very short, and Getty Oil to finance it in a very short period of time. It's an amazing origin story. And we had the good fortune, Bill kept a business diary, which was like a thing back in the day. You had this 8x11, and you kept notes of your, and he wrote down everywhere he was, who he met with, what was discussed, some key comments. And that's then the basis of the documentary and the books, was just off of that diary able to create the book. And you know, it was a resource that you just couldn't get for another origin story. So very comfortable that what's in it is what's accurate. And so, yeah, a lot happened in a very short period of time to get ESPN on the air. But the classic entrepreneur story is he needed the millions of dollars that Getty Oil provided. And once he did that, he lost control of the company, and then ultimately lost the jobs of he and his son, because Getty was investing the money and wanted to run things their way.
Yeah, I want to get into that too. That I found it fascinating. The diary, that makes a lot of sense. That's my question. You had details of like his flights he was on, where he was going, Philadelphia, Tuesday, and so on. How did he get tipped off though? I didn't know. How did Getty Oil even get interested with them? How did he meet? I didn't quite follow how that all happened.
Yeah,
take our listeners back to Getty Oil. That was those days.
Yeah, and some of your listeners might not even know what Getty Oil is. So they know what Citgo is because of the sign, but Getty then got bought by Texaco, and Texaco, you know, on, and it's part of they were a major oil machine back in that 70s era. Right. So Bill goes through his money, borrows money on a credit cards, goes through that. Scott, his son, was young, didn't have any money, borrows money from his dad, his brother, his sister, burns through that. And then he ends up, because of the condo complex he lived in Connecticut, was funded by KS Sweet, which was a venture capital company. And a guy named J.B. Doherty, who's retired, lives in Rhode Island, so another New England angle for you, got interested in it. And J.B. Doherty kept him afloat. And J.B. Doherty had relations with Getty because the 70s, there was an oil crisis where the price of gas went way up, and you know, the Middle East was short. You know, there wasn't enough gas to go around, and Getty decided to do diversified operations, which, you know, they bought logging companies and Broadway shows and real estate and things. And the guy, Stu Evie with Getty, was a big sports guy and a big TV guy. And when KS Sweet pitched, like, you interested in investing in this, they were interested. And as he went around telling everybody, the outlook was, yeah, it's going to cost tens of millions to get going, but his equivalency in the oil industry was, if it didn't work, it's a dry hole. You know, they drill these things in Texas and Oklahoma, spend a fortune doing it. If there's nothing there, they move on to the next one, because sooner or later they dig a hole that, you know, spews out oil. So ESPN potentially could have been a dry hole, but Getty provided the money, and we get into that whole thing, and the whole, you know, Stu Evie is both the savior and the villain in the story, because he provides the money, but was very difficult to work with and had no problems turning on Scott and Bill Rasmussen as soon as the ink dried on the deal.
And talk about how Bill Rasmussen was hours away from going bankrupt, right? It was literally the last possible day he found a deal with Getty Oil.
Yeah, several times actually, because he went through his own money, then he goes through his credit card money, then he goes through his family's money, then he gets connected with KS Sweet, and he goes through their money, and and we get into it in the movie and the book. The KS Sweet, J.B. Doherty, goes around to all these people that want to invest in things, but nobody was saying it was a bad idea. They were just saying it's too much money for us, and he was on the heels. Bill was on the heels of getting the NCAA deal done, the Anheuser-Busch deal done, cable system deals done. And he was also on the heels of going out of business because he didn't have any money. And when Getty comes in, immediately he's able to finish off all those deals. And classic salesman stuff. He's telling Getty Oil, I've got Anheuser-Busch and the NCAA. He's telling the NCAA, I have Getty Oil and I have Anheuser-Busch. He's telling the city of Bristol, that's like, well, who is this guy and what is this? He tells them, yeah, Getty's going to invest. It's like, oh, Getty Oil. Okay, if they're the ones that are investing, we can sell this land to Bill. So he played one off the other masterfully, and then they all came together in short order. And then the big priority was, all right, now we got a couple months to fill this. They wanted to launch in football season. We got a couple months to fill 24 hours a day of programming. And again, in that era, the programming you got was what the broadcast networks, and there was only 3 of them at the time, would give you on a weekend afternoon. You get some Red Sox games on over the air, and but not a lot. And your sports news was your 11 o'clock local news. At 11:27, they'd throw, and in Boston they'd give you the Red Sox highlight, and you wouldn't hear anything else. And that's what you got in sports news pre-ESPN.
Wow, you got me thinking too. Talking about the NCAA and another UConn connection with Bill. He talked to, I believe it was John Toner, the AD at UConn at the time. He introduced him to the Navy AD when they were playing UConn in the fall in football. And that's where Bill met him. And he was on the television committee for the NCAA. And that's what put them together with the NCAA to meet with them to get NCAA programming on ESPN. Just give us a more detailed look at that whole situation.
Yeah, it was serendipity. John Toner, again, this is pre-Big East UConn. John Toner is the athletic director at UConn. Yeah. And he is also climbing up the ranks and ultimately becomes the president of the NCAA. But a very credible guy in NCAA circles. He's not yet the president, but they set up a whole ladder that who's coming in future years. Yes. So Toner was going to become the president, so a very credible guy. The one time I think Navy ever played UConn in stores is 1978. And their athletic director, Bo Coppage, is coming to town at the same time. And John Toner says, oh, Bill, you need to meet him. And so he meets Bill at like the East Hartford Holiday Inn or something.
The Ramada Inn, yeah.
Yeah, and he ends up convincing Bo that's a great idea. So suddenly he's going to the NCAA with John Toner and Bo's endorsement. And it's like the NCAA, which historically moves at a snail's pace, gets this, they buy into it. They are looking for exposure. And they're like, you're going to show the first round of the NCAA men's? Yes. You're going to show the soccer NCAA championship? Yes. We're going to show anything that the NCAA will provide us. And they wanted the exposure. And with the endorsement of the right people that Bill was able to play off, he's able to get the deal done.
Talk about that last meeting, though, when they were like, oh, we're just going to give you a hunting license. And then Bill's like, no, we'll pay you half up front to get the rights. And that was very, I thought that was interesting because he didn't have that money at the time.
Correct. Yeah. He commits to RCA at $35,000 a month when he doesn't have $35,000, period. He then, he commits the NCAA for half of that. He just would do that off the promise. He was so believing in what was to come, which he turned out to be correct. Yeah. But he would offer up these things that financially you just didn't. My wife, who's not a sports fan, listened to the audiobook and loved it, which kind of tells you it's the origin thing. And she's like, how do you go into a meeting with RCA and say, okay, $35,000 a month when you have no money? And how do you go in the NCAA and promise half of the money? But he did it. And because he had a vision of how the money was going to come, It might not have. Most people would have failed, but he just was like, it's going to happen. I'm moving full steam ahead. And it did all work out.
Wow. Amazing. You got me thinking too. Did you ever talk to Bill to get his mental headspace when he's flying across the country, Getty Oil? Did he ever think it would fail? I guess it's my question. Or did he ever what did I get myself into? Spring 1978, summer 1978.
Yeah, we were actually originally going to call the book Intentional Optimism in the documentary, because that's been Bill's philosophy, was that I'm going to be intentionally optimistic about everything. Even to this day with Parkinson's. He has unbelievable challenges, and he says he wakes up in the morning and says, today's going to be a good day. I mean, that's a good philosophy to go through. So he and Scott both talked about with us that, like, if one of them was rejected one day, well, the other one is off doing, a cable affiliate deal or something, and they talk to each other on the phone, and it'll be, that's okay, because we got this done. And he just kept that optimism that it was going to happen. And just kept plowing through that it was going to happen. And this was his life. This is what he was going to do. This was, he was determined to get done. And so he just kept that optimism. He knew that, a cable system would say to him, We've heard from a lot of people pitching sports, never going to happen, too expensive. And Bill's like, okay, they're wrong. I'm right. And I'm going to, do the deal with the next cable system. And he did.
Amazing. Just to wrap it up too, it's sort of a sad story at the end because Bill is only there for a year, maybe. His son's gone. Getty Oil steps in. It's JB Beverly. I hope I said that right. They're out of the picture with the funding part of it. Just talk about how it all ended with Bill and ESPN.
Yeah. So the initial people helping Bill and Scott, JB Doherty and a guy named Ed Egan, both Getty pushes out at the second the deal is done. Scott, his son, who was instrumental in getting it launched, gets pushed out the day after launch, September 7 of 79. And Bill got pushed from running the thing to being chairman of the board. And they took advantage of, he's a good salesman out meeting with advertisers and cable affiliates, but pushed him out a year later. So he has the idea for ESPN, has the idea for SportsCenter, gets it off the ground, gets it so much of it. And I actually wrote the afterword at the end of the book about what exists in 2026 at ESPN. That
look at the campus right there.
Yes, that started in 1979, and then that campus, that's the front, the corner to the left is where the original spot was. It haven't moved from Bristol, but there's a lot of things that still exist in 2026 that Bill got going in 1979, but Getty and the people Getty brought in, which were primarily from NBC, Chet Simmons, who was the president of NBC, who gave ESPN credibility, but he wanted nothing to do with Bill either. And so, all those people were gone by a year later. And, it was sad, but it is kind of how business works in America.
Did Bill ever have any regret about giving so much control to Getty Oil in later years? Did he ever mention that?
I mean, I talked to him a lot about that particular point because he never has regrets. He's all like, even after ESPN, he launched a number of other different businesses, and he would call me and say, "Yeah, I'm working on this new smart home thing," and I'm be like, "Okay, Bill, what happened to the last business? It didn't work out, but I moved on." He was always put that in the rear view and positive, and so he didn't really dwell on it. Everybody would always say you should have negotiated a better financial deal, but it's easy to say. I mean, Getty had the hammer and did it. He wishes that he had negotiated a kind of an employment contract thing for he and his son where they would have been, they had a job. He didn't envision he was getting pushed out. He envisioned that he was losing control, but not to the depth and what modern, what Getty Oil would do to him immediately to get rid of him. But didn't have the regrets because he can look back at 93 and say, this is my baby. I got this thing going, and it's not, ESPN doesn't exist without Bill. ESPN's not in Bristol, Connecticut without Bill. I think Ted Turner would have launched a sports network probably at the same time he was launching CNN because he had the Braves and the Superstation. So they're, inevitably you would have gotten the volume of sports you got on television, but it would not have been ESPN.
Okay, Mike, we appreciate it. You can Sports Heaven, the birth of ESPN. You could get it audiobooks, as you mentioned, a document. There it is right there as well. As an ESPN historian yourself, too, where does ESPN go 5-10 years from now? Do you think it will just continue to grow on Bill's dream?
Yeah, a year ago, they launched the direct-to-consumer, where you can purchase it, the ESPN Unlimited. The way ESPN has thrived over nearly 50 years has been wherever the sports fan goes, ESPN goes there. It's serving the sports fan and knowing, where the sports fan is going to consume it. And whether that be, 10 cable channels or broadcast television with ESPN on ABC or ESPN.com or TikTok or wherever it is, ESPN has pivoted into that direction and, pretty confident remains the top sports service.
Wow. Well said. Mike Soltys, the UConn guy, Connecticut guy, longtime ESPN PR, now the historian. Sports Heaven, the birth of ESPN, folks. I read it in one sitting. You got to get it. I was fired up. Read it. It's a great book. Congrats. And congrats, Bill Rasmussen, as well. A great job.
Thank you. Appreciate being on and appreciate your enthusiasm for this.
Awesome. We're going to play a quick ad from Chestnut Hill Technology, the sponsor. And once again, everyone, thank you so much for joining us. Chestnut Hill Technologies is a leading technology integration and cybersecurity consulting firm based in the Boston area and owned by Boston College alum. CHT provides world-class strategy and consulting to Fortune 500 and mid-cap firms throughout New England and nationally, including State Street Bank, Fidelity Investments, Whaley Computer Associates, and Amgen Pharma. Check them out at chestnuthilltechnologies.com. That's chestnuthilltechnologies.com.